Alaska, which is a pretty remote place, but it's a big place. But it's small in number of population. My family's been politically involved there for over 50 years. My dad served in the state senate. He also served in the United States Congress in the 92nd Congress in the early 70s. My brother is currently mayor of Anchorage, serving his second term. My family's been involved at all levels of state, local, and national government. And as a result, we've made a lot of friends, made a few enemies along the way too. I'm like the black sheep of the family. I tend to be the most conservative in my family. But politics and science in the 21st century really do go together. What makes governments powerful in this century is in fact the technology that they command and control. Within democratic republics, it's critical in the 21st century that each of us at least have a conceptual knowledge of what this technology is, what it might do, and where it might go. I mean, how many people today can fix their automobile? Not very many of us. A few hands go up, most of us don't. But we can drive it, we conceptually understand it, we can operate it safely. We don't even know how to build it, but we can still operate. The same is true with all of our technology. We need to start to take that attitude of, let's learn what we can about the technologies. Let's do it in a credible way. One of the things that I became well known for is all of my books are extremely well put. And the reason for that is lay people can take that material, take it to specialists, take it to engineers, who can then go to that material and it gives it credibility and brings in other people into this fight. Because it really is a fight in the direction in which the technologies will go. Many have asked me over the years as well, don't you get fearful? Because I've taken on military on a number of projects, I've testified all over the world. And the answer is no. I've never experienced any fear in any of my work since I began this work in 1994. And my wife, I called my wife and said, why is that? She'd tell you, because there are hundreds of people just like you praying for us every day. And it does work. And it does work. And when you're following your calling, when you're following the mission, there is no fear. There's anxieties occasionally about kids. I mean, you got a big family and you're traveling around, you're always worried about your kids. But other than that, it really has been great. I mean, it's been a lot of sacrifice along the way, but none of it would have been possible without each of you. So starting with HART, the thing that struck me is here was a system being built in Alaska, the High Frequency Active Auroral Research Project. And this project involved the design of an ionospheric heater. And this was designed by a guy named Bernard Eastland, Dr. Ben Eastland, who I've gotten to know fairly well over the years. In fact, I was with him in March for a few days at a closed conference in Dallas, and I'm going to talk about that towards the end of my presentation. But Dr. Eastland went to Atlantic Richfield, which owned major holdings of natural gas on the north slope of Alaska. He came to them with a concept for marketing their gas that would actually develop a weapons-based technology by being able to burn the gas in place, run it through what are called magnetohydrodynamic generators, which are simply generators that produce electricity, and then take the electricity and run it through an array, a field of antennas that would then be able to concentrate or focus radio frequency energy into a relatively small area beginning about 30 miles above the Earth's surface called the ionosphere. Now the ionosphere, for those who listen on shortwave, you couldn't hear it without. Shortwave is what allows those wavelengths to bounce around the curvature of the Earth so you can pick up shortwave literally around the world. So the ionosphere is important for lots of different reasons, communications being the primary reason that most people consider. The ionosphere also is a layer that extends out several hundred kilometers out from that 30-mile range. And it acts as a shield. It protects the Earth from incoming particle streams, cosmic radiation, various kinds of radiation that would make life impossible on this planet. People worry about ultraviolet radiation because of depletions in ozone. It is nothing compared to if we ever had a chance to lose the ionosphere. I don't believe that will occur. I mean, it's charged up, it's fueled literally by the sun. You get the magnetosphere, which is when you look at the Earth and you see around the Earth, those old high school pictures, when you look at the Earth, they have these long tail downwind from the sun, and that was the energy essentially interacting with the magnetic fields of the Earth and creating these layers. Now, when you look at the ionosphere, and you look at this graphic, and this is just a small graphic showing a field of antennas focusing the energy up into the ionosphere. What's interesting is anyone who's done any radio engineering knows that radio frequency energy generally would look more like this. starting out narrow and spreading out with distance, just the same way as if I shine a flashlight on the wall. Beam would be small here, it would spread out. That rule applies to energy generally, but when you focus energy, like you can with the laser, where you can concentrate that energy, this is, by analogy, would be very similar. We're concentrating radio frequency energy to create various weapons effects. One of the things that concerned me was sort of how this would play out. And what Dr. Eastland envisioned was this is the Earth in the middle of an energy field that would be designed and developed through many of these systems, literally wrapping around the Earth. In other words, it would cover the entire planet except for the polar regions where the magnetic field lines actually intersect the Earth. The thing that concerned me about this was if you go back in time in terms of research on the issue of ionospheric modification, one of the things that came up from a guy named J.F. Gordon MacDonald, who was a geophysicist at UCLA, who was also a science advisor to Lyndon Johnson when he was president. He had written a chapter in a book in 1969. The book was called Unless Peace Comes. The chapter was called How to Wreck Your Environment, which was before Earth Day, so I guess they could do that in 1969, and it was politically correct. But what was going on there was a discussion in mid-chapter about the idea of electronically stroking the ionosphere in just the right way to return a signal to the Earth that would influence the behavior of people within the region of that discharge. Now, this gets amplified later in a book that many of you may have seen. It's called Between Two Ages, America's Role in the Technotronic Era by Zbigniew Brzezinski. Anybody ever read that book? Oh, come on, nobody in this room? This is a very important book to read, and I'll tell you why. This is one of the guys who formed the Trilateral Commission with Kissinger and Rockefeller and all those guys. This he wrote when he was at Columbia University back in the early 70s. When he wrote the book, it is a forecast of what would happen economically, socially, and politically around the world over the next 30 years. And if you read it today, it's not a forecast, it's a history, because it all happened exactly as he predicted it. Within page 54 and 56 in that range, in this publication, is a discussion of this very technology of being able to electronically stroke the ionosphere in just the right way to return a signal to the Earth that will manipulate the behavior of those in contact with the signal. Now, that issue, that whole issue of manipulating the entire planet using magnetic field lines was also amplified more recently in a paper published in 1995 at Laurentian University by a guy named Persinger. Dr. Persinger had developed a number of experiments within his lab where he was using magnetic fields to stimulate the brain of his students, or I guess victims, experimental subjects, whatever you want to call them. They would come in, he'd put on a helmet, looked like a big motorcycle helmet, had magnetic solenoids, would stimulate various portions of the brain. And interestingly enough, the kinds of things he could create were what are referred to as out-of-body experiences, with all the full array of all the things that are reported by people who have those experiences. He was able to have UFO abductions with all the experiences of everyone that has those experiences. Now the question for him was, well, obviously this is just a mind effect, something that can be stimulated by the mind, but he said, if we could manipulate the magnetic field lines of the Earth, we could manipulate behavior over huge geographic areas. He produced a paper in that in 1995. And it was just about the time that we were releasing the first book, Angels Don't Play This Harp, which got into a little bit of this issue. Now, mind control as a concept actually made the news. How many know The Economist as a publication? Okay, a few. One of the most prestigious publications in the world. The Economist, cover story, May 25th, 2002, the future of mind control. And what this was discussing was the ethical considerations of this technology as it was advancing. I want to go back